Hello everyone, and welcome to Semiconductor News Decoded. I'm Ty, and I've spent 31 years inside the semiconductor industry. Today's topic: Tower Semiconductor has just signed a $1.3 billion customer contract for silicon photonics and received a massive $290 million prepayment from that customer. Let me walk you through what's really going on here and why this matters so much. As always, let me explain this like you're hearing about semiconductors for the very first time. I'll keep the technical jargon to a minimum and lean on everyday analogies. So if you're a specialist watching, please bear with me on the simplifications, just for the early scenes. Here's the news in one sentence. A specialized old-school workshop, the kind that only makes one very particular type of precision mold, has just had a major manufacturer prepay in full to lock up its entire production slot 2 years out. And the real story here is not which technology is best. The real fight is over where this thing can actually be manufactured reliably. This workshop is nothing like an ordinary casting foundry. It can only produce one very specific kind of precision mold. But suddenly, that exact mold is in massive demand everywhere. The reason? Dozens of huge new logistics warehouses are being planned and built around the world, and every single one of them needs this specialty component. And it's a component that only this particular workshop can manufacture reliably and at scale. For a long time, this workshop was a quiet, unassuming player. It's not one of the big general-purpose mold makers. It's a niche, specialty operation. But it's precisely because it sits in a niche that over many years, it has accumulated technology in an area nobody else bothered to enter. You simply can't stand up a new workshop like this overnight. The equipment, the experience, the accumulated know-how, all of it takes decades to build. What's actually happening right now is not a competition over which mold design is best. It's a battle over who can actually make it. The moment major manufacturers realize we're going to need huge volumes of this next year and the year after, the very first questions they ask are, which factories can actually produce this, and are there any production slots left at those factories? And paying up front? That's a powerful signal. In the business world, handing over cash before you receive the product is something you only do under very specific circumstances. It means we absolutely have to secure this, and we cannot let any competitor take this slot from us. The fact that a major manufacturer just executed exactly that move is hard proof that this workshop's production capacity now carries a real premium. That wraps up the absolute beginner version. The core point is simple. When manufacturing capacity is scarce and demand is surging, the production slots themselves start to carry strategic value, and customers will pay upfront just to lock them in. From here on, I'll switch into my 31 years in the industry mode and walk you through what's actually happening in the real semiconductor world. Let's get into the real picture. Tower Semiconductor is an Israel-headquartered foundry, a contract manufacturer of semiconductors. They are one of the very few foundries in the world capable of manufacturing silicon photonics, or SiPho, devices that use silicon itself to control light. Today's news has two key pillars. First, Tower has signed a $1.3 billion customer contract for 2027. That's roughly 190 billion yen. Second, Tower has received a $290 million prepayment from that same customer, roughly 45 billion yen. A prepayment of that scale is genuinely unusual, even by semiconductor industry standards. You should read it as the customer expressing their commitment to securing manufacturing capacity and expressing it with hard cash. The backdrop here is the explosive growth in demand for optical interconnects inside AI data centers. Historically, server-to-server communication has run on electrical signals, but as the volumes of data AI systems handle have exploded, electrical wiring has hit hard limits on speed, power consumption, and heat. Optical interconnects solve that problem, and silicon photonics sits right at the heart of this transition. In February 2026, Tower formally announced its partnership with NVIDIA. Since then, more than 70% of Tower's manufacturing capacity through 2028 has already been booked. When a foundry has filled the majority of its capacity slots several years out in advance, that is a textbook sign that demand has fully outstripped supply. That is exactly what's happening right now in silicon photonics manufacturing. This is precisely why I read today's news, not as silicon photonics has crowned a technology winner, but rather as the volume production slots themselves are starting to be valued. The point isn't which technology is technically superior, it's that the number of foundries actually capable of mass-producing SiPho is extremely small, and those rare manufacturing slots are now starting to carry a real premium. Tower's strength is its multi-site manufacturing footprint and the realistic supply capacity that comes with it. Their flagship 200mm SiPho platform, called PH18, runs primarily out of Fab 3 in Newport Beach, California, formerly Jazz Semiconductor, and many high-volume customers shipping to NVIDIA, including InnoLight and Coherent, manufacture right there. Tower also operates a 200mm fab in Migdal Haemek, Israel. On the 300mm side, the centerpiece of expansion is TPS Co. in Japan, with facilities in Hokuriku, Uozu, and Tower also holds the option of using its 300mm shared fab with ST in Agrate, Italy. It is exactly this multi-site footprint that justifies the kind of large-scale, prepayment-backed deal we are now seeing. The customer believes Tower can actually deliver. Manufacturing silicon photonics requires processes that are quite different from ordinary silicon semiconductors. You have to integrate optical waveguides, modulators, and photodetectors all on the same chip, and that calls for extremely precise process control. This is not a skill you pick up in a year or two. It is exactly the kind of barrier to entry that Tower has built up patiently over many years. On the demand side, the buyers driving AI infrastructure investment are the cloud hyperscalers and the chip design companies led by NVIDIA. As they actively shift the communication backbone of their data centers from electrical signals over to optical, silicon photonics manufacturing capacity is increasingly becoming a strategic asset in its own right. From my own 31 years inside this industry, I can tell you, this kind of upfront payment behavior tends to show up right at the inflection point of a cycle. Demand surges, supply cannot keep up, and capital starts flowing directly into the factories that hold capacity. Structurally, the picture looks very similar to the great semiconductor shortage of 2020 to 2021. The difference this time is that it is happening in a much more specialized, higher value-added segment of the industry. That said, you also have to look at the risks coldly. Silicon photonics is getting a lot of attention, but at this stage, the cost of volume production is still high. There is also ongoing competition from rival technologies, InP-based platforms, silicon germanium, and others. And both TSMC and Intel have already entered the SiPho space themselves. If either of them decides to throw their full weight behind it, the competitive risk for Tower is real, and it has to be taken seriously. On top of that, this current stage, demand is now visible and the slots are filling up, is really just the starting line for a much larger supply chain ramp. Packaging, testing, integration with optical components, those downstream steps could absolutely become the next bottleneck. Volume ramp-up in this kind of advanced technology is never simple. To pull this all together, today's news points to three things. First, demand for optical interconnects inside AI data centers has crossed the line from expected future demand into real, booked demand right now. Second, the scarcity of SiPho manufacturing capacity is now being widely recognized, and the production slots themselves are accumulating real financial value. Third, Tower's multi-fab footprint and its track record have built enough credibility to draw out a prepayment of this magnitude from a major customer. Here's my own conclusion. I genuinely believe Tower's SiPho strategy is heading in the right direction. But the right lens for understanding this story is not a technical winner has been crowned. Its manufacturing capacity itself is being financially valued. The $290 million prepayment is a clear signal that this market has shifted from demand that might come someday into supply we have to lock in right now. I plan to keep watching this trend closely. And here's one final thought. The same capacity squeeze that has been hitting the memory market recently may well be migrating next straight into silicon photonics. That's all for today's Tower Semiconductor episode of Semiconductor News Decoded. I'll keep bringing you semiconductor news and analysis, so if you found this video interesting, please like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.